right? So we are looking today at risk assessments for the NEBOSH General Certificate. And just to let you know that um, the format of this form was changed a bit. So I mentioned that at the top of the hour, where if you will email this form about maybe a month or when we first started, the form changed a bit. Now the content didn't change. So that's a good thing. The content didn't change. It is the form that more or less changed, right? So um, for Roshan, who is here, I know when you first came to us, I'm not too sure if Nafisa as well, March month, just before the lockdown for the pandemic anyway, the form was the way it was. So even Roshan, I know I saw yours this week, you're gonna have to kind of tweak what you have back onto this new form, knowing that it's just a matter of copy and pasting the information back into these respective columns anyway, right? So today, we want to just do part 1 and part 2, and I'm going to go into it now. You can read the information on the top. I guess I'll read what's in red. Declaration: by submitting this assessment, part 1 to 4. For marking, I declare that it is entirely my own work. I understand that falsely claiming that the work is my own is malpractice and can lead to NEBOSH imposing severe penalties. See the NEBOSH malpractice policy for further information. And the severe penalties can be, investigating the matter to determine, if you did really work with someone. As I mentioned, there's a difference in a risk assessment in the company. You have to work with a team of specialists because this is an exam. You're going to have to work on this on your own. Now, as we get into it, there's a lot to say, and I know we are fighting time this morning as well, that I would want you all, if you can work on part of this for this week. The reason is that we do have some students here. I think I mentioned their name already. I wouldn't call it again. That there were some students who did this already. I mean, when I mean they did it from last week to this week, and they were able to get through with the part 1 and most of the part 2 anyway, right? I would be willing to look at a draft. Remember though that we are not the examiners, and we can just give you an answer along with the requirement of the project, right? So typically my answers would be, like refer back to the guidance on this. And I sent you all the guidance yesterday, right? There's a guidance on this project for those of us who are hearing us, I guess, on the YouTube channel anyway. And if those of us who missed today, like Shane and Colleen, you can get all that information from the NEBOSH site. You just have to put in Google NEBOSH home or home NEBOSH. From there, you should click your subject, National General Certificate. I can do this for you next week because we may have more time next week. And from National General Certificate, on the left-hand side of the screen, that's going to open up, you are going to see a tab. Well, in fact, not really a tab, it's just a word, which is resources. But you can click on that resources. The word then is clickable. So you can click on resources and it's going to open up into the NG2 folder. If you open that folder, you would see this very sample I'm looking at here. You will see the form I sent you yesterday, and you are going to see the guidance, right? So let's go into it. So what you're required to do here, you are required to choose a company. Now you can choose this from somewhere that you worked before. I know it is still, the time of the pandemic and not a lot of companies are taking on students. So it's fair to say that you can use a company that you worked before, or you can even use like an educational establishment. You do not have to put their name. This is a piece I told you that if you need writing paper, you could write on it. You could write, if you have this exact thing, you could write on it anyway. But you could write, for example, some of the things I'm telling you. You can use the precise name if you think it's not going to be an issue. The UK is not too concerned with that. I mean, it's not as if they are going to, call in to say, is Atlantic LNG a real company? It should be based on a real company, of course, but you could change a name to, to maybe, I guess I have Precious on the screen here. You could probably change it to Blackwell, engineering company or something like that. And that's okay. There's really no need to be concerned too much with the name. Those of us who are working like Duracell and Jeffrey, if you want to use a name, fine. It's not an issue, and it should not be an issue for your company either, because nothing here is going to be shared with a local audience. The person that's seeing this is an examiner, and most of them I know is actually in the UK anyway. I think that's a criteria. I don't know if that has changed, but I know most examiners are in the UK. So reading Atlantic LNG or Nutrient then is the same as reading, like Shadrack and Sons, because it doesn't seem to be that that is a real or imaginary company. And you are allowed to do that. You are allowed to change the name if you think it's going to sort of, reflect badly on your company. Anyway, right? So you're going to give the name of the organization. I was telling you all that this should not take you more than this whole the part I'm going to cover now. This shouldn't take you probably more than, I was going to say hours, but I know some of you all may be working and may not have all the hours in a day, but it shouldn't take you more than a week. And that's why next week it should be okay for me to see this, right? It is important if you, like I said, you wanted to get like a local comment on it. Remember, we are not the examiners, but it'll be nice to know that, you're kind of meeting the standards. And that's what my contributions are anyway, that you're either meeting the standard or you're not meeting the standard, right? So anyway, the name of the organization, National General Garage Limited, known as NGG Limited. If you have your book though, like I mentioned to you, NEBOSH changed the form, right? And so the content you're looking at here on page 23 of your book, it's the same, right? They didn't change the information. If you look at your book, you have it's the same NGG Limited, National Garage Limited, right? It's the same thing. It's just placed in a different format, right? So I was saying this again to anyone that did complete it already. Those are completed since March month or April month, and you're waiting to submit that, you have to just go and tweak the form back a bit anyway. So the site location here, Leicestershire, this is where NEBOSH is located. I would want though that if anyone put in this here that you can actually put, like if you're putting Claxton Bay or Point Fortin, that you do put, like Point Fortin south or like southwest of the island of Trinidad and Tobago. So please put that, because we do have some other students in some other countries. I mentioned Guyana to you last week. Wednesday was their exam, right? And so it's good because, well, I think by us here looking at Leicestershire, I would have said that's where NEBOSH is located. But maybe if you did not know that, you would not have known where Leicestershire is. So Leicestershire is in the UK. So likewise, putting places like Point Fortin, Cuva, right, San Fernando, Rio Claro, right? You may just want to put that is, like east of the island of Trinidad and Tobago. You could even put located in the Caribbean. Number of workers there, 24, right? I still like though, I mean, I know they have done it like this. I still like though that if you put in number of workers 24, that you can still give it like a male and female ratio. You can say 24 workers, and that comprises of, like 15 females to, well, the rest will be males anyway, right? And it may be best to even put like an age group if you want, ranging from the ages of 18 to 60 or something. You can still do all of that. If you look at the one in the book, you'll see they did make some little ways of doing that, right? So you can still give them a male to female ratio, but the main thing is to give them the number of workers, right? So you can say, like a male to female ratio. You could actually do it as a ratio if you want 1 to 3, and an average age group of maybe 24 to 60 or 50, whatever have you, right? But the thing is, it's that simple. Let's go to the other one, the general description of the organization. Now, this is where you get most of the marks from. I'm not seeing my cursor to get it to move, so I'll just read there, right? So let me read it first, and then I'll tell you what is the main thing in it, right? So NGG Limited is a medium size. Just try if I could try a bit to get it to look a little bit bigger for you all, right? Maybe that would work, right? So yeah, so NGG Limited is a medium-sized garage and office. By the way, if you look at your book, it's the same thing they have there. It's the same words for, like I said, those who finish already, and you would have gotten caught in the fact that the form just changed a bit, but it's the same content, right? So it's a medium-sized garage with offices. So you need to describe the size of the company here. If you're just making sub-notes, you can just write it down. You need to put the size of it. Vehicle repair shop, including stores area and paint spray booth. It is family owned and does not have any other branches. So if you are working for Unicoma, from Massey, you have to say, Massey is like a large company. Maybe the branch of Massey you're working for, if it's probably motors or something, or wood, which was called Wood Group before. You can just put that there, and you put, that it is, like a multinational company, whatever it is, right? So this piece here is very important. Again, I'm going to read it first and then tell you what they were looking for. But hopefully by reading it, you could figure it out, right? So the business does a lot of repairs and maintenance on commercial vehicles and body repairs for insurance companies on vehicles, mainly cars and vans that have been involved in accidents. Servicing and MOTs, which is like maintenance, are also carried out for members of the public. Typical activities undertaken include moving spare parts from the stores to the workshop, engine repairs, activities relating to servicing / MOTs, body repairs, draining fuel oil, spray boot activities, including the use of paints that are solvent-based. So anybody can tell me what's the main focus of that description? The main focus of the description, right, is activities. See if you're seeing that. The bulk of that middle there was activities. So you have to go down then in the nitty-gritty of activities, right? I'll read it over slowly now. Also, you would need to kind of give a description of where the activities are being done. So if you read the top of it, you'll see. So in this paragraph, I have 3 things. And then if you want to write it on the side, I am not going to grab my marker because it's going to slow me down. Every time I do that, it's going to freeze the screen. So you write it down, right? So beyond the top line, which is like size and description of the company, right? What it is a motor vehicle repair shop. This is a description of the company. Here you have purpose. There's 3 things there. Here you have purpose. What is the purpose of that business? You have purpose. Then you have like departments, or should I say locations. You'll start seeing there after the purpose, it does a lot of repairs and maintenance. You start seeing like locations, right? You start seeing then like locations, right? You start seeing things like, they will talk about like different places like the stores, the workshop, right? So in this, then it have like where the activities are being done. The activities are not being done, how to say this then, I guess in space, but it's taking place somewhere. And then the rest of it goes into the nitty-gritty of activities. Typical activities, so the 3 things there: purpose, location, which is like departments, and then the activities, right? Typical activities undertaken include, and it's nitty-gritty because it's telling you what's going on, moving spare parts from the stores to workshops, mobile workshop, engine repairs, activities relating to servicing, MOTs, body repairs, draining fuel oil, spray boot activities, including the use of paints that are solvent-based, right? So you just look at this and do one. I'm just going to do one at the top of my head. If I was doing one, I would say, well, I would say like Shadrack Safety Institute is a medium-sized company that consists of an office, and then we have the school, which is at Riverside Drive. Its main function is in terms of tertiary education, training in health and safety. It is a family-owned business that does not have any other branches, right? So, and that's how you started. And then like our activities and more include things like the dissemination of knowledge, at the venue, on Zoom, training, consultancy in the field of health and safety. It's going to be like that, right? So just look at this one and make up one similar to what your company is doing. Last thing here, the garage operates from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. on weekdays and is closed on the weekends. workers are only required to work 7 hours per day. So they are staggered start and finish times in place. Staggered means it's not fixed, right? So this is very important. You must give the time the business is open. And this latter piece here, remember I'm trying to give you like the main concept behind it. The latter piece there is that what you're seeing there is shift. So here has times and shift, right? And you must put those in. Those of us who say the company has no shift, you must actually say that. You can say that the time is like 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. and there are no shift systems in place, right? Or if there is a shift system, but then you walk through the shift system anyway, right? The latter part here, the assessment will cover the garage. Here's a further look at the description of the areas to be assessed. This here is zoning down. This piece here is zoning down on where is the risk assessment actually going to cover. We had said before there are different places mentioned here, like the stores, the workshops. There may have been a moto or somebody repair shop as well. I'm not quite sure, right? You can read it over. I'm seeing a spray booth. For those who don't know, a spray booth is actually a place. A spray booth is a thing then. It's not just an activity. A spray booth is a room that has been designed for you to spray in, right? So having discussed maybe about 3 areas on top here or 3 locations, you now have to say description of the area to be included in the risk assessment. So let's see what they said. They say the risk assessment will cover the garage that includes the storage area and spray booth activities. The office area has a separate risk assessment. So this is a refining approach where you are now going to say of the areas you mentioned on top, like for example, the office in Duncan Village for the school here or the school down in Riverside Drive, we consider the risk assessment is only going to cover the school in Riverside Drive. The office has a separate risk assessment, right? Take a note of that. I wish I could have written more on this, but I can do it next week for review sake. But I know today, every time I grab that marker, it would have freeze the screen and I have to go and, unfreeze it. And the Zoom has given some issues today. So if I could say that again, here you're going to have a refined approach to say where is your risk assessment covering, and that it may not cover the whole company, or it may not have covered the 3 areas that you mentioned if you were using like I can't think of anything to be honest to you beside it, because I worked in a similar place as a workshop as well, right? Like a machine shop. But if you are saying a machine shop, you can say the risk assessment would have covered the machine shop, and the office, it would not cover the storage area. So you have to do something like that here. That was one that I just made up. So you are zoning down until where you think, you will get your best hazards at anyway for the project, right? To the bottom of your form, there'll be a place to put your student number. These numbers have not been generated as yet. They'll be generated when you'll pay your exam fee from NEBOSH. That's not me. I am not keeping it back. I don't have it. NEBOSH will generate it once the exam fees are paid. Your name will have to go here as well on the project, right? So once you do that, we're gonna get down into any other relevant information. This is important. You have to say who here is ultimately responsible for health and safety. A lot of people will put this safety advisor, but the word here is ultimately responsible. So it may be like a safety manager or a director or the CEO of the company. So the managing director who reports, sorry, I read that wrong. The finance director who reports directly to the managing director has direct responsibility for health and safety. You must put in that line there. There's a little disclaimer here. If you're worried about confidentiality, you could invent a false name and location for your organization, but all other information must be based on something factual, right? Ask if you have any questions on that. You can just follow it. It's very simple. The analysis I did made it sound harder, right? The first thing you put in here is the name of the company, which could be real or made up. Site location, you put your name here, but please describe it a bit. Like I said, Leicestershire for them is known, but that may not have been known in Trinidad and Tobago. Likewise, Pond 410 or Claxton Bay. would not be known to somebody in the UK. You can just give it like where it is, you know, like south of the island with Trinidad and Tobago. Number of workers, 24, I mentioned. You could go on to give a male and female ratio, right? Description, you give the place that you're going to look at and maybe how much, you know, different locations it have in it. Here you have locations again, but you have purpose here, the purpose. There are going to be some different locations here, and then you have the maintenance as activities. Here you have time and you have shift. If you don't have a shift, you have to say it doesn't have a shift. You can't leave it blank, right? Some of my students was referred for leaving that blank in the last, well, not in the last, but the first time it went wrong anyway. The description of the area to be included in the risk assessment. See how short it is? You are just going to zone down into where you want your risk assessment to cover. That it might not be able to cover the whole of Massey or Unicoma or the whole of Nutrient. You just want to cover maybe one or two specific activities and areas, right? Last one, you say who is ultimately responsible for health and safety, noting that this is not the safety officer. This may be someone that the safety officer reports to. Just do as you see and you'll be good to go with that section, right? I am looking at the time and realizing that we might not be able to finish, and that is because of the Zoom issues. We had a late start to today. Anyway, I'm going to the next piece of it. This next piece of it is actually called, I wonder if they give it a name, but this second piece is actually meant to be like the methodology, right? I'm not seeing they using those phrases, but that is the, if you look at it, I guess, on the guidance, you see it is like the methodology of how you do the risk assessment. For simplicity's sake, I'm just going to read the left-hand side and tell you what the right-hand side have in it, and then we'll try to find it, right? So what you're going to do here is that you're going to outline. By the way, these things have a word count. You should stick to these word counts. It's okay if you pass it by a little bit, but it should not have 50 words, then you should come very close to this 200 words here. So anyway, if you just follow this as a guide, you would automatically come close to the 200 words, right? Outline how the risk assessment was carried out. This should include the sources of information you consulted. Now, again, I know I wanted to read all, but this would really mean things that you would have researched then. Or if you looked at any of the company records, like their risk assessment or their accident book, that would be the sources of information consulted, right? Include who you spoke to, how you identify the hazards. Now, how you identify the hazards typically is by like an inspection, by you taking a walk. Now you can take, like I said, a walk in your mind, because I know we're in a period of lockdown, but you could probably just imagine walking back into your workshop or walking back into your old school and or your old place of work and realizing, you know, what was the hazards there when you were there, right? You need to put what is already being done and any additional control actions that may be required. Now, you don't really need to put it here, but you need to say that you are looking at what is already being done. And I wish for those of us who write, and you could actually put right here, maybe this is where I could pull my marker here. You need to put here, if what is already being done is suitable. You kind of have to, in fact, you're going to have to use the words that I mentioned before, suitable and sufficient. And let me say this a bit slower now. Like I said, you don't really need to put it here, but you need to say in the methodology. Remember, this is what we're looking at here. This is not the table as yet. You need to say that you will be looking at the current controls to see if they are suitable. You just need to say that line. And if they are not suitable, see if you're getting this, you would use the information you obtained via research or via what you identified to suggest further controls. Right? Nearly all the drafts that come to me, I see that missing. And I don't understand why, because we are saying it on the videos on them, right? Nearly all the draft. You have to put a line. The purpose then, I wonder if you could get it. Let me just grab my marker back again, right? Sorry for the long explanation. Almost what you're doing then, you are how to say this? You are looking at, I'll put a box here, right? You can put in it if you want. You are looking at research information on the internet, on your type of work then. If you look up here, you'll see that here. See if you see that there. You're looking at research information from the internet. This is where you're going to put back the ACOPs and the guidances we had come across in one of our lessons. This is where the ACOPs and those HSE guidances come in. Let's say your business is fabrication or service or whatever is your hazards, then you have to just put in one of the ACOPs and the guidances here and perhaps the regulation, but we wouldn't get to the regulation today. We'll get to that next week anyway, if that's in part 4, right? The point is here, let me just show you the concept. The concept is that you have to use research information. Then you are going to assess your company. I'll put company X here. You're going to assess your company then. Like if you research something about noise and you see the noise limit is 80 decibels. But in your company, you check the risk assessments and you realize it has been like about 90 decibels, right? So you are looking at the research information. See if you've seen it started to really decide if what is already being done, if it is suitable. And then what you have to do, you have to propose then a way forward. So then you have to see, because you're not doing it as yet, you'll be doing it on the table. Based on the research information, you're going to assess if the current controls or what you're doing already is sufficient. And if it's not sufficient, you are going to suggest further controls. So you have to talk about that here because that is what our methodology is. You're talking about what you're going to do. Think you all get it? In other words, then you wouldn't know how to go forward or what is the further controls if you didn't do any research or you didn't look at the company's, like hazards and past risk assessments, etc. You have to look at past documents and stuff like that, right? But you wouldn't know if they're doing enough, because how do you know then the 90 decibels is not enough? The only way is to compare it back against with a standard, or maybe compare it back with some sort of illness record or sickness absence or something. So that's the idea behind the methodology that you're using. The information again, sources of information consulted to propel you forward then, right? Let me read it here for you before I use all the time. So I started looking up references to good practices related to our organization. So I had you do this on the first lesson by looking at ACOPs. You remember that, right? For your company, right? The HSE website had lots of resources. For example, health and safety in motor vehicle repair and associated industries, HSG 261. By the way, you have to go back and quote it. One of your first assignments for me was to do this, to get the name of the document and the number of it, right? You have to put back the web address here. You can do this as about 2 of them. They have just done 1 here. By the way, there's a word count, so maybe 1 is enough. So they say HSG 261 available from this website was a good source of information for deciding what control measures should ideally be in place. So what the person is saying is that they're going to use that then to help them put further controls in place. Next thing they did, remember, you have to actually go and see who you talk to and how you identify the information, right? So research is a part of it. After looking at sources of information, I then went around the company, and you can do this, like I said, mentally, and talk to people who were doing the job. This helped me to identify the hazards that were present, which is this phase here, along with any control measures in place. It also helped me to assess whether the current controls were adequate. So look, that line is here. And for the life of me, I don't know why students are not seeing it. I will tell you again that I had about 6 students as referred, meaning they didn't pass because they left that out. And this is after we told them about this on drafts, right? The workers that I spoke to gave me information that wasn't obvious from just a visual inspection. For example, a lot of the workers didn't know that there were dust masks available or the reason why they should be worn. I also checked the accident book to see what types of incidents had occurred over the last 12 months and whether any of these incidents were reoccurred. I also checked the reasons for sick absence again to see if there were any reoccurring themes for ill health. Following the inspection, I referred back to the notes that I made during the inspection and the sources of information that I'd already reviewed to help me decide on additional controls. This is the way forward or actions that were needed. So you see the concept there. They use research, they use a walk, they use a talk, which is the interview, but then they assess the current controls to see if they are suitable. This person said adequate, and then they're going to use the information to suggest further way forward. You don't need to put the further way forward here. You are just saying that this is part of the methodology behind the scene. Questions, anybody? You need to come in with them if you have them now. Huh? Hopefully you took the notes. And again, it's just there for you to follow. And once you follow, you should be okay. I'm just going to ask again, anybody for any questions there? Okay. Right, so I guess by the silence, nobody has a question. So these things, like I said, if you sit to do it, it don't take you very long. You'll more than get this done in it's going to take like about an hour. If so much, I wouldn't take an hour to write that. I'll take about half an hour to write that anyway, right? I'm trying to get the slide to move there. Right, okay, so now we're on the table. We should be on the table now. So again, if you completed this before, the table remains the same. So there's no need, like folks like Shanaz and Roshan and them, there's no need. The table didn't change then, right? The table is the same in terms of the format, right? So what you need to do, you need to fill out the top here, organization name, date of the assessment. This could be any date, to be honest with you. If you want, if you're starting this now, you could probably put a date in January, but you don't have to. This could be done December anyway. The scope of the risk assessment. The scope of the risk assessment is the area that you're zoned down on. You notice they have the workshop, stores, and spray booth. Remember, they had said that they were not going to look at the office because the office had a separate risk assessment.
Hi, sir.
Yes, go ahead.
Question. Do we have a limit to the scope of the risk assessment? Does it have to be 2 locations or 1 area or 3 areas?
No, the principle behind the areas chosen is that you have to get 10 hazards, or should I say almost 10 different hazards. So the only thing that governs the scope is if you choose an area that is too small, then like you could only get 5 hazards. Okay, that shows the workshop then, right? And all I could get is like fire and maybe projectiles and what again, crushing or something. So because of that, you may need to extend your scope to say, okay, that you want to look at the stores as well, or you want to look at the office as well. So if you find yourself running out of hazards, then because I know we're not on lockdown, but still is the pandemic. It's not safe to go anyway. But if you find yourself mentally trying to think about the hazards in the workshop or the office, and you can't come up with more than 5, but you really need 10, so then you now could come and say, okay, I should look at the office, but I should probably look at the yard as well, or the parking area, right? So let that be your judge then, right? Let that be the judge. If you can get all 10 from one workshop, fine, right? If you can get 10 from a workshop and an office, fine, right? Let it be a judge as to what makes up your scope then. Once you can get it in one area, fine. I do suggest that you go to more than one area because you want to get a wide range of hazards. The trick with the hazards is this. So I've already started talking about this already, right? The trick about the hazard is that you want a range of hazards. You don't want all the hazards to be housekeeping. You don't want it to be rags on the floor, then there's a paper on the floor, then there's a cord on the floor. You won't get much marks for that. In fact, you'll actually lose marks, right? In fact, you'll actually get 1 mark for that, even if you have 3. You want to give a wide variety of hazards then, like one must be chemical, one will be like ergonomic. So you mightn't be able to get an ergonomic in a warehouse. Ergonomic is like how people sit and stuff like that. You may be able to get that in the office. Then you may want to get something on access egress, so you may want to go out in the parking lot. So let it be a judge then as to what makes up the range or the variety or the scope of the assessment, because you would probably need more than one area, but then you don't need 10. You don't need 10 areas to get 10 hazards because the workshop may have 5 hazards, the office may have about 3, the parking lot may have about 2. Yeah? Okay, anybody else with that? Wow. I am so out of time. What I'll do here, right? My greatest advice today will be to go up online. Well, first of all, right? The advice would be to do the part we just did, which is the description, part one then. It would actually be to do that, right? For next week, Saturday. I will try to finish this. I'll have to start my diploma class maybe just 5 minutes late, right? Right, so the first thing is to focus on that. And the other thing is that remember there's a video on this on YouTube, NG2 risk assessment. So I'm just gonna do the first one here for you. And what you need to know is that you need to do this 9 other times. Now, as today's the first day, I wanna tell you that you can't do more than 10, and it's advised that you do more than 10 hazards. I'll say that again. The guidance says 10, and I said 10. But it's advised that you do a little bit more than 10. You can just watch your book and see. You can check how much in the book and you'll get about 13 in your book. Don't overdo it because I'll send you back with it, especially if you let me see it as a draft. But you should do about 12 or 13. The reason is that sometimes like you may think a hazard is different. Like you may put like how you see in hazardous substance here. And then you come back, you put dust, but then you come back and you put something else, like you put asbestos then, which may also be classed as a hazardous substance. The idea is that you need about like 10 hazards from about 5 main categories, but I'll explain that next week anyway, because it may be a little too late to explain that. To be safe, the simplest thing to say is that you need like 10 different hazards, or most of them being different. Like you can't have 2 hazardous, but the thing is you must end up with the 10 hazards in the end. Right, I explained that. I could get a mark and show you that, but you need to cover 5 main categories then, right? But what has worked is that most people try to get 10 different hazards, meaning like one is hazardous substance, one may be noise, one may be slip, trips, and fall, one may be work at height, one may be ergonomic, and that's okay, and that's the best way to do it, right? But I'm saying sometimes people repeat, sometimes they repeat like 3 on hazardous substance, but not knowing that it is a hazardous substance. So in the mind of the examiner, they may not have covered the 10, meaning that they covered 9 and not 10. So it's sometimes best to cover like 12 and give it like a different hazard. Maybe if you think about it a bit, you could think about, did they have any vibration hazard? Did they have any biological hazard like viruses, bacteria? Did they have sanitizing measures for what's going on now? So that's like a different one then. It's not a hazardous substance, it's a biological hazard. Anyway, hopefully you write that down. Let me just go into this. So what you're gonna see here, I am gonna get a marker, but if it comes, right? So what you want here, and please listen because again, you could get this on YouTube anyway, but you can listen now, right? So what you need here, you're gonna see, you want to put the hazard category down and you want to put the hazard down. Now, most people think that this is the same thing, but it's not the same thing. The hazard category is like the grouping of the hazards. Like slip, trips, and fall is a hazard category. I'll just do 2 for the sake of time. Work at height is a hazard category. But then if that's the hazard category, what is the hazard? The hazard is what you are seeing or what you are picking up with your senses then, right? So let's look at this one. The hazard category is hazardous substance, the same thing as in the book, by the way. And the actual hazard the person is seeing is that dust, there's a high concentration of processed dust in the air. So this is what they are seeing, and that's the hazard. So don't think it's the same thing. There's a difference between the hazard category and the hazard. Now, for the sake of avoiding doubt, you want to use your second textbook here. At least those who have this. I mean, this is our students in Trinidad anyway. And I guess if anybody around, they will have the RC book anyway. You can use this second textbook here. And basically every chapter in this book is a different hazard, right? So if you look at the list of it, you'll see things like if you open the book and if you're having trouble getting them, you'll see like every chapter is a different hazard. They have like electricity, you have like fire, right? So you could use your NG2 textbook. That's why you have it. One of the main reasons for you having it anyway is that you can use this to get the hazard categories like fire. Like if I was doing one here, this is the third one I'm doing. If the category is fire, then you will have to put like what you are seeing. Like you can put a worker was seen smoking next to a barrel of diesel, right? So I'll have to leave that there based on time. So just do it like that and it should be okay. Here you're gonna put who might be harmed and how. Who might be harmed is all workers, customers, and others visiting the organization. The aim of this is that you have to say who is the who. You can't just, and my marker just froze it, you can't just say, you cannot just put then employees. You have to say who are the employees. Like if it's a technician, a customer, a visitor, you have to go on to kind of quantify then who is the all employees. A lot of people think it's just by putting employees there. The next piece is very important, but the marker on Zoom is not coming down. Anyway, I would have shouted it just was to say who are the employees, right? The next piece is the how. A lot of students think that the how is the consequence. The how is not the consequence. How is not the consequence. There is the consequence. If you read down here, you'll see asthma and, short-term acute occupational asthma and stuff. But that's not the how. The how is how the person will be affected by this dust. So you want to say like high concentration of processed dust are always present from the routine and frequent activities being carried out. Since there is no dust extraction, only dilute ventilation is currently being used. People are breathing in, so this is inhalation, hazardous dust particles, and that is the how. You could put the consequences. This can then cause short-term acute occupational asthma, etc., right? But that's the how, right? So you have to say how. How could I tell you this again? How could I tell you how then, right? How could I tell you how? Again, if, let's say, I guess that's a good one, but you need to say the how, right? Let's say we just spoke about the fire, about the workers smoking next to the barrel of diesel. You can put who could be, you put all workers such as the technicians that was smoking if there is like a supervisor or safety nearby. And then you say, like diesel is a flammable substance by workers smoking next to the diesel barrels. It can create, or they dispose cigarette butts can create a source of ignition if it is made contact with the fuel, and this could result in, fires, destruction to property, burns, and death. But I would have gone on to say how, which is the disposed cigarette ends then could be a source of ignition that if it makes contact with the fuel. So you have to say the how. Next one, what are you doing already? Dust mask available, but it's not mandatory that they are worn. So this is what I told you about. A lot of students go to put a lot of things here, but the truth is you may not have a lot of things there. A lot of people put, okay, like PPE was given. If you notice what this person do here, they have to say if that was suitable, if it was not suitable. So right here, it's not good enough then to put PPE available, dust mask available, but you have to say it is not worn. Like I was telling you before, if you put like, some people put it like there's a supervisor, there's signage. But if there is supervisors and signage, how come you're still breathing in dust, right? So you have to say like, there is a supervisor that inspects the work area, but that may not be a thorough examination. You have to give an idea then that this is not suitable. All of your controls here, you have to tell them in a way that, you see, if it was suitable, the problem wouldn't be there. So you have to lean to that fact, and that's why I said at the start of the class that you have to use these words suitable and sufficient. You have to say maybe there is signage, maybe there's a policy. That's supposed to be an A there, right? God forbid, or whatever that turned out to be there, right? But you have to say like if there was a policy, like for opening the doors or whatever, have you say there's a policy, but no one is following the policy. And it's based on that, could you now go and suggest further controls? The further controls must be numbered, 1, whatever number you want to put, 1, 2, in this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever going on. These must have an appropriate time scale. You'll see it here. And very important, the responsible person, what NEBOSH wants you to do, they want you to match up the person with the numbers for the further controls. So the workshop manager is doing 1, 3A, 4, 5. Well, I haven't gone on to 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, and 14, but you have to match up that responsible person. You have to match it up to these numbers here. So you have to do that about 9 other times. And of course, I did challenge you to get to 12 for the sake that if you would have repeated something like maybe another type of dust, metallic filings or something, and that may have been classed as a hazardous substance, that is okay to repeat 1 or 2, but it's definitely not okay to put all 5 on hazardous substances. Questions, and I have to end because I have a class in waiting. Now, again, today was meant to be the first of 2 parts. For the 3rd time or 4th time today, this is already on YouTube. When I get a couple of minutes today, I will try to post it today group chat. You can have a look at it. The point is you will have this, you follow it.
So I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
If we're doing an actual company from Trinidad, do we have to get like documented approval to use the company's name?
No.
Okay.
Right? As I said, you can just not use the name. You can just make up a name, right? You can just make up a name, RNS Company Limited or something, right? So you don't have to get any approval for this. Granted that it's going to the UK and the UK officials, you know, I mean, the name is just where you'd have gone to. It's not as if your information, your company information is going to be shared with any local person. If I look at it, it's just meant for seeing how you are going along the guidance anyway. It's not meant for me to mark, nor is it meant for me to share with anybody, right? Folks, I have to cut it here. We will pick this up next week. I would want you all to, like I said, to give the part. I'm going to stop the recording there, right?